Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We are really excited to share some information we learned through a survey of dual credit in Illinois about a year and a half ago. Our first presenter up here, Amy Galvin, unfortunately can't be with us today. She is in the middle of legislative session and has a bunch of bills being called in the House today, I think. So I am Sarah Stashkiw. I am the director for P20 Educational Partnerships at the College of Lake County in the far northeastern corner of the state. But I'm really here in my role as the president of ILLISEP, which is the dual credit organization in the state of Illinois.
Good morning. My name is Meagan Mitchell. I represent Ed System Center of Northern Illinois University. I'm the pathway manager. I'm excited to be here with you all to present this presentation today.
And so we just wanted to give you a quick overview of how we'll spend our time together this morning. We are going to spend a little bit of time setting the context for the survey that we conducted. So talking a little bit about the dual credit landscape in Illinois, dual credit data from Illinois, a couple reports and data sources through Illinois, and then we will jump into the survey itself. We'll talk a little bit about the logistics of the survey, kind of how we decided to conduct a survey, and then actually go through the questions on the survey and share the results with you. And then we'll talk about what we are doing with the information. We will share a bunch of resources throughout the survey. There will be links to those at the end, and then we'll have some time for reflection and questions. But please feel free if you have questions at any time. This is pretty informal, so we're happy to pause and entertain questions or have a little bit of discussion sort of as we go. And before we really get started and dive into our information, we wanted to get a sense of who's in the room. Now, do not use this QR code. We were just trying to get the technology working here, and with the Zoom, it's just hard to go back and forth. So we're going to do this the old school way and just have you kind of raise your hands. So if you are here as a post-secondary administrator or staff member, if you could just raise your hand for us. Okay, thank you. If you are here as a post-secondary faculty member, if you could raise your hand. Okay, perfect, thank you. If you are here as a secondary administrator or staff member, if you could raise your hand. Thank you. And a secondary faculty member or teacher? Counselor? Okay, thank you. How are you here representing a community organization? Okay, a couple. Any policymakers? Anything we haven't covered? Okay, well, it's interesting. It's kind of a really good mix in here. A lot of times when I do presentations, we're leaning really heavily one way or the other. So it's nice to have a mix, and that actually really represents, I think, some of the responses on the survey too. So it's always really nice, I think, to have that balance. And then again, we were going to do this on a poll, so it would be easier to share. But is there anyone here who is willing to raise their hand and share something that you really want to make sure we cover, or you really want to get out of this presentation? Okay, we'll save that for the end. And if you have something kind of burning in your mind and we don't cover it, again, there'll be time for questions and reflections at the end of the presentation. And so we'll talk really quickly about the dual credit context, and many of you probably are familiar with a lot of these things. Again, I'm here representing ILLISEP, which is the state dual credit organization that brings together dual credit practitioners for professional learning and networking, and really trying to increase equitable access to high quality dual credit programming across the state. ILLISEP is a state chapter of the national organization, NASEP. So NASEP stands for the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. It's called concurrent enrollment because there are about 1 million different terms. That's an exaggeration. I think there's somewhere in the 30s to 40s, but there are a lot of terms used to describe when high school students are taking college classes. In Illinois, we typically call it dual credit, but nationally, one of the other terms is concurrent enrollment. So I always like to share that because it can be a little bit confusing. Of course, our state agencies are all very involved in and invested in dual credit. So we've got the Illinois Board of Higher Education for 4-year post-secondary institutions, the Illinois Community College Board for 2-year institutions, and the Illinois State Board of Education for K-12 districts. Our post-secondary institutions are accredited by the Higher Learning Commission, which is a regional accreditor, and it's where a lot of our requirements for dual credit come from, is through the Higher Learning Commission. The two really key pieces of legislation or legislative documents are the Dual Credit Quality Act, which has been amended a number of different times, and the Model Partnership Agreement. And then we have actually a lot of data on dual credit in Illinois. So I'll talk in a minute about the Illinois Dual Credit Report through ILLISAP, the Stand for Children report. The Illinois Community College Board has a report that they put out with dual credit data. The Illinois State Board of Education includes information on their school report card. So there are a lot of places we can go for data. And then, of course, individual institutions often have their own data that they share to varying degrees. I'm trying to give just a quick snapshot of some of the data, and I do want to say this is Illinois data. On this slide, we're looking at information from the Illinois Community College Board, but it is pretty similar to what we see across the country in terms of a pretty steady increase in dual credit offerings across the state. Also, in terms of having the majority of dual credit courses being offered and taken on high school campuses. And then, as you can see, the most common courses in Illinois are really leaning toward the gen ed classes with writing, math, composition, Spanish, history, psych, stats. We do get sports and fitness and medical office assistant in there as well. And this information is actually from the ISB State Report Card, and really just showing that while we are very excited that we are having more students participating in dual credit, and you can see that an overall steady increase at the bottom, but what's concerning to us is there are significant gaps in access for traditionally underserved groups. So when you look at the first little chart for low-income students in Illinois, you can see there's a significant gap there, as well as for Hispanic or Latinx students in the middle and Black students on the right. And so there are a number of groups, both at the national and at the state level, working to try to figure out what do we do to close those gaps, since those really aren't acceptable. When we think about all the benefits and opportunities that dual credit opens up for students, it's really important that all students are able to access those opportunities at the same level. And so some of you may be familiar with Unlocking Potential, the report. I think that'll be on your right, on my left, which was published by Level Up and the College and High School Alliance, two national groups in 2019. And this report really offers state-level policy recommendations for ways that states through policy can close those opportunity gaps, can increase equitable access to high-quality, rigorous dual credit programming. And so Unlocking Potential makes recommendations in 6 different areas, which you can see here on the screen. Having equity goals and public reporting on those goals, program integrity and credit transfer, finance, course access and availability, instructor capacity, and navigational supports. And I see a bunch of you taking pictures. I think this is going to be posted, so you'll all have access to it. And there's a slide at the very end that actually has links to all of these resources and data points that we're talking about. So if you're interested, you'll be able to dig into all of this information. And so again, this report was published in 2019. That same year, the College and High School Alliance and NASAP, the National Dual Credit Organization, approached ILLISAP and asked us if we would be willing to write a report for Illinois, but based on Unlocking Potential. So they wanted us to do a gap analysis to look at where does Illinois stand in relation to these 6 broad categories of policy recommendations, and then to issue our own recommendations at the state level. And so we gathered together a group of stakeholders. We were supposed to start engaging in this work in March of 2020. So you all know what happened there. And it did not go quite as planned, but you can see we still did have a really good and diverse list of stakeholders who we brought together virtually to, again, do that gap analysis and make some policy recommendations. We were impacted in terms of participation by the pandemic. So our original envision included many more people, a couple full day in-person workshops, but everyone's capacity was limited at the time. And again, I think when you look at this list, we do have pretty good representation. So we felt pretty confident in what we learned. And so in the fall of 2020, we did publish the Illinois Dual Credit Report. Again, there will be a link to this on the resource page. And I'm not going to go into this a ton. This is really just to set the context for why we did the survey and to really start to dig into the survey. But I did want to just go over very quickly where we found some strengths and where we found the biggest opportunities. And I'm guessing these won't be a surprise to you. But the strengths, the fact that we have some definitions and some policy around dual credit, the fact that we actually have pretty significant legislation for dual credit are all strengths in the state of Illinois. There are states that don't have any legislation at all. Dual credit isn't addressed anywhere. And so we are lucky to have some formal guidance in Illinois. The next two things are really actually addressed in the Dual Credit Quality Act, but the professional development plans that allow high school teachers to start teaching dual credit as they're still earning the credentials to fully be able to teach based on the Higher Learning Commission's requirements. And then also the model partnership agreements, which help secondary and post-secondary partners come together and put together their agreements. So those are really good strengths for Illinois, but of course there are always opportunities as well. So some of the biggest opportunities we found for Illinois are making sure that our dual credit offerings are really strategic and meaningful for students, that we're avoiding those random acts of dual credit. A lot of opportunities, and this came up in a couple of different places, around awareness of dual credit, just that it exists at all, making sure that students and parents, and in some cases, secondary and post-secondary staff know about dual credit, know that it exists, know about the legislation and the things that guide our dual credit partnerships, and then also know the benefits and the great opportunities it can open for students. Funding is another one. It's really messy in Illinois. There's no real guidance about what dual credit could or should cost. There are some sort of parameters, suggestions in the model partnership agreement, but partnerships aren't required to use that model partnership agreement. Additionally, in Illinois, we don't really report on what dual credit costs, so it's hard to know what other areas are charging for dual credit and kind of compare, like, where do we fall? So there are a lot of opportunities to kind of clean up the funding and make the funding structures a little bit more equitable and transparent. And then, of course, the teacher pipeline in general is a challenge. The dual credit teacher pipeline is even more challenging. And then ensuring that we have a diverse teacher pipeline for dual credit is an even bigger challenge. About the same time, the Illinois Dual Credit Report through ILLICEP came out that was really looking at state-level recommendations and policy in the state agencies. Stand for Children Illinois published a report called Expanding Equity in Dual Credit, and their report really focused on the implementation piece, on individual partnerships, and on elevating some promising practices in partnerships in Illinois. So we kind of had a nice balance between the two different reports. And so as we were working together and collaborating and putting some of this information together, we realized there was real value in those partnerships and in the groups who are all working toward the same goal of increasing access to high quality dual credit opportunities in equitable ways across the state, that it made sense for us all to work together and continue to meet. So initially there were 4 groups that continued to get together: the Partnership for College Completion, Ed Systems, ILLICEP, and then Stand for Children Illinois. We've added a number of organizations and individuals over time. It's a pretty flexible group, but it is a group of people really committed to this work. And so as we were thinking about the reports and the themes that we found, the opportunities, we really didn't want these to be documents that were collecting dust on desks somewhere. We didn't want to put all this time and energy and ask for all this input and collaboration and not do anything with it. So we were starting to think about and talk about what can we as a group do to actually try to move the needle and close those opportunity gaps in our state. At the same time we were having those discussions, ILLICEP particularly was getting a lot of questions about dual credit that made us hyper aware of the fact that there really is a lack of awareness of dual credit and what it really is and how it should be implemented across the state. And there was a lot of misinformation out there as well. And so in trying to figure out, we're looking at the themes about like there's a need to remove barriers, to provide support, to increase awareness, to gain buy-in, to create tools for partnerships. All of these things we were learning, I think were really highlighted by some of the questions we were getting and realizing the misinformation and the lack of awareness that was out there. And so that's at the point where we said, you know what, before we actually move into a phase where we're acting on some of the recommendations, we need some more input. We need to get a better understanding of what people know and think about dual credit in our state. And we really wanted to make sure that we were getting input from all the stakeholders we could think of. So students and parents and secondary partners and post-secondary partners and representatives from the state agencies, policymakers. And so we put together a survey, which is meant to be a really broad temperature check of dual credit in Illinois. So we didn't drill down into a lot of detail. We just wanted to hear from people. What do you know about dual credit and what do you think about dual credit? And so now we're at the point, hopefully I've been able to provide a pretty good foundation for why we got to this point. And now I will turn it over to Meagan, who's really going to dig into the survey and talk to you about how we put it together and what we found.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for providing such a robust and dynamic background of the context of this particular survey. And so here are some of the questions that we asked. So there were two different categories. There were Likert scale questions and then free responses. And so some of the Likert scale questions were, who benefits from dual credit? Do dual credit programs practice equitable recruitment and enrollment? And lastly, dual credit courses are high quality and rigorous and college courses. In terms of open-ended questions, we were interested in getting responses around the advantages and challenges around dual credit courses, a better understanding of the alignment of these particular course offerings to the organization mission statements. And then we provide opportunity for organizations to provide recommendations or other feedback or thoughts and ideas that they may have around that particular topic. And so what you see here is a simple Google survey, and that's what we use. And so the cool thing about this is we were able to leverage many of our networks and our community organizations, and they were able to send this out to various districts, community college partnerships, agencies, students, et cetera. And so it was pretty low tech, but we had a high commitment here. And so with the Likert scale questions, we segmented the data by population. And then the questions, we did the same thing. Then we summarized that particular data into different tables and graphs and compared the respondents or the responses. And so for the free or open-ended questions, what we did was we worked together as a group. So literally a group of one person representative from each of these organizations came together and we would separate all the responses. And so it came out to like 500 responses per person. And we took time to literally categorize and code the data. And so we will have weekly meetings to discuss our thoughts and ideas around what we thought the data meant and take a deep dive and have very critical conversations around those particular processes. And so you kind of see at the bottom graph our process, right? So we would highlight some categories and we would literally tally different particular topics throughout, and then compare, contrast collectively. And so, to our surprise, we had a little over 1,000 responses. And so you can see that there was pretty much an equal response among students, students, secondary institutions, post-secondary institutions, and also parents. I want to put a special emphasis on parents because oftentimes that voice is missing in this work. So be able to capture that, for us, it was huge for our state. And oftentimes our legislation, they want to hear parents' responses and their thoughts around these particular topics. So that was very beneficial to us. So we're going to review some of the quantitative questions. And so here's what is going to happen here. Unfortunately, our tech didn't work, so I'm going to ask you all to kind of stand and move to different parts of the room. And so the first question here is, students generally benefit from participating in dual credit. And so I want to know your response to this. Then I'm going to show you the state's response. And so how you are going to show me your response is you're going to get up, and then this side of the room is going to be strongly agree. The middle part is going to be agree. This side is going to be disagree, and all the way to the end is going to be strongly disagree. Okay, so we're going to stand, reflect on the question, which is, students generally benefit from participating in dual credit. So again, strongly agree, this side, strongly disagree, this side. Okay. Love this response here. I see most of the people generally agree with that statement. I have no one on this side in terms of disagree or strongly disagree. And so here's how our data shook out. So very similar to what you all kind of think about that particular question too. The next question is, low-income students and students of color can benefit from participating in dual credit. Strongly agree all the way to the end. Agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Same spot, I see, like that. Love that. All right, here is our responses from the states. So it kind of looks like you all are thinking in that same vein on this particular question as well. The next question is, dual credit programs seek out and enroll students of all socioeconomic and demographic groups. Okay, I see some movement happening here. All right. So now it seems like the group has shifted majority strongly disagree or disagree. Still have a few here with agree. And so here is the responses that we received from the state.
So this is where we were hoping to collect data from all of you to add to our beautiful, and this question would have been really helpful. But
I see a hand.
I have a question. So I see that 6% strongly disagree, but does that equate to the data of how many low income and underrepresented students that are taking over?
Rephrase your question.
So if 6% strongly disagree, does that match the data of how many low income and underrepresented students are?
so I think what you're asking might be answered well by the slide with the little dials showing significant gaps. The gaps are bigger than 6%. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, high schools benefit from offering dual credit to students. All right, so we're shifting again. Okay, I see our two friends back there. Okay. And here is Illinois' response to that question. The next question is, colleges benefit from offering dual credit to students. See a few shifts happening. And here is the response from that particular question. Dual credit courses are high quality and rigorous. No neutral option. You gotta choose. And here is the response to that particular question. Dual credit courses are college courses. Again, the response.
So we did disaggregate the data for all of the questions by the different groups, but that's a lot of data to share in a presentation like this. So we're just kind of highlighting it here. So you can see we did show you the averages, but it does look different based on who's responding, particularly for certain questions.
Interesting when you look at post-secondary faculty in comparison to students. All right, you all can go back to your seats. Thank you so much for being good sports about that. I apologize for our tech not working correctly, but I appreciate the movement in the room. All right, so now we're going to take some time to talk about some of the qualitative or open-ended responses that we received from our survey. And so one of the questions were how to expand equitable access. And so some of the responses around that centered around increased affordability, the importance of limiting the cost to family and providing detailed information about the cost. So parents, families, and students want to know about, is it the cost of just a course? What are the books? What are those costs? Are there transportation costs associated with that? Any other institutional fees is important to note. Again, we really hone in on the notion of avoiding random acts of dual credit. Our goal is to make sure that we are accelerating a student in a particular pathway. And so when students take courses all over the place, that doesn't support our goal. And then we think critically about inclusive marketing and meeting families, parents, and students where they are, and also taking a multiple touch point approach in terms of how we're advertising and providing information about the benefits and importance of dual credit courses. And as you can see, there are some quotes that we kind of pulled out too. So you can take the time and kind of look at those and read those as we continue through the presentation. And so some of the advantages that we saw, again, overall cost savings on colleges, especially if that student continues their education at that particular institution. It can decrease the time to completion. Of course, college credits. Students have the opportunity to earn transferable credit in some instances. And then early exposure to college and transition. So building academic confidence, right? Exposing students to academic rigor, allowing them to understand what it's like to take a college course, introducing them to college resources for those students who are taking a course on that particular college campus. Then, of course, increasing college matriculation. Again, some challenges are similar to the advantages. Academic rigor, right, is also a challenge. Students need to understand that it's not a high school course. It may be taught at your high school, but there are additional pieces that go into these particular courses. They are indeed college level. Ensuring high school teachers maintain the integrity of the course and that the structure and all the content of that particular course is taught. Administrative logistics, support capacity. Offering dual credit courses is a heavy lift within school districts. And so that includes the recruitment of courses, course scheduling, again, the overall communication logistics, the cost, the transportation, admissions, placement testing. We can go on and on about the logistics of those particular courses. And then teacher qualifications, making sure that teachers are credentialed to teach those courses. And then pushing back on the negative perception of dual credit or even the lack of awareness about the benefits of dual credit course offerings. Alignment to mission. Most responses indicated a strong alignment. Many of the responses emphasize that dual credit provides the district with the opportunity to expose students to college readiness, which we know, advance equity and access, improve the lives of the community, of the students that they serve within that particular area through education, and then demonstrate academic rigor and educational excellence. And so when we ask the question, would you recommend dual credit? Here are some of the responses that we received. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague Sarah to talk about taking action on the data.
Thanks so much, Megan. A lot of great information that we got, and I appreciate you taking the time to kind of condense it and share it with everyone. You can see we got a really high volume of data. And so when we were planning the survey and thinking about what are we going to do, we knew our first step was that review phase. And as Megan said, it was a really heavy lift. It took a while. We were a little overwhelmed because we got so many really detailed and thoughtful responses to those free response questions. And we wanted to make sure that we had a lot of integrity in going through those responses and making sure that people's voices were really heard and that their input was recorded in the way that it was intended. So that was the first big step for us. We knew the second step was going to be, how are we going to share the information? We're asking people to give us feedback. We want to make sure we're sharing that feedback back out. And how can we use the information that we receive to figure out where are those misconceptions? Where's their misunderstandings? Where is there a lack of awareness, and to try to raise that awareness and buy-in across the state to ensure that we are really empowering partnerships between high schools and colleges to develop and design and implement really high quality dual credit opportunities that are meaningful to students and ensuring that students have equitable access to those opportunities. And the third step is really that using the information, using what we create to share out, using that increased awareness to gain buy-in. And ultimately, the goal, of course, is to close those opportunity gaps that we've been talking about this morning. And so we're kind of between the share and the act phases, I would say, right now. We did publish, like 6 months ago, something like that, a while ago. We published 3 survey briefs, which you can see pictures of them here. And again, they're all going to be linked on the resource page. One of them was the advantages of dual credit. One is maintaining dual credit rigor and high quality delivery. And then the final survey brief is about expanding equitable access to dual credit. And each of these survey briefs includes data from the report, data from other sources, such as some of the ones that we went over earlier from ICCB and ISB, some national data, some potential resources, some of the quantitative data, but also quotes that we pulled from the surveys that we thought were particularly meaningful. So those are available. They've gone out through all of the partner organizations who worked on the survey. We've also done a lot of work, like I said, many of those groups continue to meet regularly. And so we were able to provide a lot of input and feedback around the most recent amendments to the Dual Credit Quality Act, particularly in trying to ensure that the opportunity for teachers to use professional development plans didn't expire as intended, and some work around the mixed classes. And Stand for Children is also currently, I think, finalizing, if Amy was here, she could tell you way more about it, but finalizing their dual credit advocacy toolkit, which is really exciting. It will be an interactive online tool where you can basically go in and identify yourself as a post-secondary staff member or administrator or faculty member or a high school teacher or administrator or counselor or a student or a parent. And then it'll actually give you, if you include the organization you work with, if it is a high school or college, it'll give you some of the stats for dual credit in your high school through your college partnership. And then it will give a ton of resources and templates and tools that you can use to advocate for more dual credit in your area. So it's really exciting. The last iteration that I saw, I think is really robust and pulls together a ton of information and resources for stakeholders across the state. And so we're continuing to try to hear what are the needs for high schools and for colleges, and how can we, through our individual organizations and through our collective power, working together, try to address some of those needs. The survey briefs or the toolkit? So these are the survey briefs, which there will be a link to. I don't think the toolkit is live yet. Do you know? I don't think it's live yet, but I will give you my card afterwards. And if you want to send me an email, I can find out for sure. I know the last version I saw was just like a test version. Yeah, I think we're finding a couple things. Other questions? Okay, then next we just wanted to share a couple of tips because we were actually really surprised by how successful the survey was. I was like crossing my fingers and hoping that we would get at least 100 responses. So when we got over 1,000, we were really excited, but like I said, also really overwhelmed because we're a team of volunteers just trying to engage in this work together, and looking at the volume of some of the responses was kind of eye-opening. But we were really strategic and purposeful as we were planning and implementing the survey, and I think that's part of what led to our success. So we really recommend, if you're trying to get input from a broad group of stakeholders across a large geographic area, to focus on purpose, partnership, and planning. So for purpose, what questions are you trying to answer? Like I said, we wanted a broad temperature check. I saw and heard some of you talking when we had you moving across the room. We're like, what exactly do they mean about this? And, I don't know exactly, I need more details. How do I answer? And I think part of that was intentional, right? We weren't at the point where we could drill down into that level of detail. We really just wanted first step, what are people's initial awareness, knowledge, feelings about dual credit? We may get to a point where we decide we do want to drill in deeper on specific topics, but our purpose was pretty broad, so our questions were pretty broad. So just making sure you know your purpose, you align your questions to what you want to know to make sure you're going to get the information you're asking for. And then we always recommend just making sure that equity is at the center of the work you're doing. And partnership, I think, was one of the most powerful things for us. Each of the groups really taking a lead on this survey had very different connections and very different resources. And so I think that's part of how we got a really nice balance between students and parents and secondary partners and post-secondary partners, because we could each reach out to our very different but very well-connected individual networks to try to engage them. We could also partner with other organizations that we work with outside of the group working on this survey to have them push information out as well. And then we also shared resources. So for example, ILSEP is literally a membership-based volunteer organization. It's like $75 for a membership per year. Like, we don't have a staff, we're all volunteers. So we don't have things like a PR and marketing department or social media group or any of those things. Like, we're just all, trying to do our regular jobs and then fit in some extra work. But some of our partners like Ed Systems and Stand for Children, they have those departments. They have people who are paid to work on these things. And so they were the ones who put together the survey briefs and some of the social media pieces, and really were able to support with that work. So just thinking about, for any of the work you do, I mean, this conference for me is such a great example. How can we build connections? Because we're all here because we share the same purpose, we share the same passion, and we want to help students succeed. And so just thinking about where are the resources, what resources can you provide to partners that you meet here today, and what resources are you looking for that partners might be able to provide for you? And then just really detailed planning, like how are you collecting the data? We used the Google Forms. It was really easy to send out. How are you analyzing it? How are you sharing it? How are you taking action on the results? When's the best time to administer it? We are so sick of surveys. Like, how many times are we asked to provide input on things? So how do we time it so that we're not overwhelming people and sending everything out at once? Who do we send it to? What's the best way to reach them? And so being really purposeful in planning out the whole process from the beginning. Now we, since we didn't anticipate so many responses, we had to readjust partway through because it wasn't just a quick, scan through a few free responses. Because I also think, I assumed, okay, no one does the free response, right? Maybe it's just me. Like, if I can click a box, we're good. Once you ask me to think and type, no, not happening. So we were really surprised, but in a good way, right? That's where you get the really rich and detailed and good information where people actually understand what you're asking and have information to provide back to you. So of course, always building in kind of those opportunities to adjust course, but having an initial plan and making sure you're staying on track. And so that really wraps up our prepared remarks. We wanted to save some time at the end, though, for reflection, sort of on what's in your brain right now. Like, what questions or ideas or possibilities has this sparked for you? What aligns really well with the things you believe, the work that you do? And what are some takeaways you have? So if anyone wants to share, we can start with questions and then just any general reflections or takeaways. Yes. So in the CTE areas, do you mean?
My organization does. We work with various community colleges and districts, including vocational institutions. I can definitely give you my card and connect offline and kind of see if we can talk through that, okay?
Yeah, and I'm happy to give you my card as well. We have a really robust partnership with we call it the Tech Campus in our county. Yeah.
As you all were discussing random dual credit courses, one of the things that I have a question about is I see offering dual credit courses that don't align with what the Illinois State Board of Ed says are the areas of dual credit. How does that figure out? Is this an agreement with just that high school and whatever college, and the credit goes just for that college? How does that work?
Yeah, oftentimes, that happens, right? So when we see that, what we call random acts of dual credit occur, it's usually a moment where teachers or the institution may say there is students are interested in this particular topic, so we're going to offer all these courses that students are interested in taking, right? When in an ideal world, we need to be more strategic and help our students think critically about those particular courses and how they're going to align to a particular pathway that's going to accelerate them to and through a particular career or into a particular academic program. And so oftentimes what we do is we start with looking at like the job labor market in that particular area, that region, or within our states, and thinking about the different types of careers that students are interested in. And then we kind of backwards map into courses that are available at the community college level, and then teachers that are available to teach those particular courses. And then we start the conversation about pathways that fit within that particular process as well. And so if you have questions about that, or if you work with districts that need that type of support, I love to, have a conversation with you as well about how we can think through avoiding those pitfalls of random acts of dual credit.
And I think many random acts of dual credit in Illinois are rooted in some of the challenges around instructor qualifications, where post-secondary institutions are really held to the Higher Learning Commission's requirements, which are nothing like, requirements for professional educator licenses at the K-12 level. And so I think many partnerships started dual credit just where there were high school teachers who met the Higher Learning Commission's requirements, which you have to start somewhere, right? Like, again, it's not the ideal world, but I think that's where a lot of things started. And so it's hard to transition from, we have these random acts of dual credit, and so how do we move toward really strategic offerings? And not just the strategy and the offerings, but in who's taking the classes. Because if you have a pathway that's really strategic for one student, it may not have anything to do with what another student is interested in. So I think there are a lot of partnerships trying to navigate through that right now and thinking about, we want to be strategic, this is what we have. I know I can speak for the College of Lake County specifically. We're really trying to build our transfer options around the general education core curriculum, and those are kind of our priority classes. So we've mapped out for each high school, these are the general education core curriculum classes that we recommend. This is where we already have dual credit. This is where your students can already earn credit for these classes through AP. So where's the gap? Like, if you're thinking about expanding, this is where we want to look next. And if we have teacher credentialing issues, how can we partner together to try to creatively address them? And then for our CTE classes, really looking at what are we offering? Where do they fit into certificates for us? And how can we then build a more robust program so that if we're adding classes in that department, that they're all part of the same certificate, and hopefully students are getting very close to earning a certificate while they're in high school, or we do have some certificates that students can earn. But I think that's a really common challenge right now, is like, many of us have random acts of dual credit, and how do we shift from that? Because you don't want to erase all the work that's already been done. Other questions? Yep.
Demographic data survey, like income or grades, especially some of these questions would be related to say how, especially asking about like dual credit programs, reach out to students of color and like ask them to see how students of color like responded to that question.
I don't think we did. I think we talked about it, and we sort of decided that, this is my memory, but it's like 2 years ago now. We had a bunch of questions, and we kind of pared down, like, for this broad kind of stroke, where are we going to start? And then I think, my memory is that there were a bunch of more questions specific to demographics that we had, like, as almost follow-up questions to some of these, and that we said, like, if we did a follow-up survey, we would probably have more of those demographic questions. I think we were worried about getting responses at all, which we didn't need to worry about. And so we were like, what is the bare minimum that we want to ask? But yes, I agree, that would have given us really rich data. It tends to get really messy when you try to disaggregate by everything. So we got a little lost in the data, I think, for a while. But yes, I completely recognize that would add a whole nother level of really rich information. If there are no other questions, oh, sorry.
time, more about that.
Yeah, I think some of the marketing strategies I've seen that school districts do, particularly like CPS, they're working with large numbers of students of color, is working directly with parents, right? They are sending documentation home that is very digestible to a wide array of people. They're educating students on the benefits of dual credits, what that means for them, how it is going to support them in the long run. And they're coaching them through that process. I don't want to say hand-holding, maybe intrusive advising would probably be a better term, in terms of helping them critically think through how it's going to benefit them in the long run. So it's like those multiple touch points along with various aspects of marketing, whether it be print, marketing, whether it be like open house types of events where you're inviting families and students to come collectively.
And I think other strategies we've tried or we've heard about are very similar in terms of thinking about those multiple touch points, but thinking about where are students and families getting information and what information sources do they trust? And so are there community organizations we can engage differently? Are there churches? Are there athletic organizations? But, thinking about where are people going to get information and how do we get our information there, I think is something that's been sort of top of mind for us. If there are no other questions, we've got a couple minutes left. So no, it's not posted anywhere, but if there's interest, we can certainly bring that back to the group and see if and how we could share it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Was the survey, did you ask geographic questions in terms of respondents? Like, right? I'm going to assume that different people are different.
Yeah, I think that was also on our list of like wish list. And that actually kind of segues into what I was going to ask next, which is like you're bringing up things that are great. If we were to do a round 2, what else do you want us to ask? So I heard more specific demographic information, which I love and I think is important. Yep.
But love to hear from have experience. How has it actually? So, now even college, graduated college, they appreciate how, etc. I'm not sure.
I think that would be a really good question for Amy.
Yeah, so we have not done that from a student's perspective. However, I'm actually working on a project where we're doing that from a community college perspective. So we're working on a project with ICCB where we are evaluating the model programs of study and the dual credit courses that are offering, the dual credit offerings that are suggested in those particular guides. And so that data will be coming shortly. Working on it. It'll be coming out shortly.
And I think there are individual partnerships doing that work, but I don't know that it's elevated to the state level. Like I know for us, we're partnering with our high schools to get current student stories on our wish list of things to do is creating a student advisory of both current and past dual credit students. So Amy may know because they work more on the student and parent side than ILLICEP does. So she may have more information. If you want to grab one of our cards, we can get that information to you or connect you with Amy.